Okay, welcome back to the Science Fiction Podcast. I do apologize for the inconvenience for the last couple of days. I haven't been feeling good. Like I said, I got the ulcer to deal with. That's going to be the problem there. More often than not, it's just how it is. I'm not saying it's upsetting or up too fitting, but I do apologize for episode 3 being on a big hiatus. So, it was like something I had to do and something I had to get through. Right now I'm feeling low K. I just woke up. I haven't had my cup of coffee, but I'm not. I'm going to have a cup of coffee after this episode. But I wanted to talk about episode 3. I want to talk about anime and science fiction put together. You know, there's a lot of science fiction novels to maintain a lot of science fiction aspects. Gundam being one of them. Steam Boy kind of being another one of them. Metropolis, the anime version of Metropolis, no comparison to the black and white version. There was no, there's a couple other good ones that Outlaw Star, even if it's a series, I'm talking about from Gundam to Outlaw Star. But when it comes to anime and sci-fi, it's very unique. In a way, it's very unique, but there's not many people that get into anime with sci-fi. I mean, there's not many people, but I'm one of them that gets into sci-fi. I get into a lot of Gundam, basically from Gundam Origins, Gundam A Famous Team, Gundam 0083, Gundam 0080. I mean, I get into science fiction like that. Even if it's based on war, it's just the way I see it. I get into a lot of the Gundam series. If the storyline's good, I'll watch it. But it's like, even or to it, but you have to really think. When it comes to like Cowboy Bebop or Outlaw Star, it's going to be a little bit tricky for it. Space Dandy was another one. I didn't really like that, even if they butchered a lot of the episodes, especially the first episode of Space Dandy. It was kind of stupid. I mean, I didn't like it, how they did the narration and all that. Same creators that did Cowboy Bebop and a couple others. I mean, they did good with the anime cartoon to it, but I mean, the anime they did pretty good with Space Dandy, but I don't think they would have done much more into that. But when it comes to Cowboy Bebop, Outlaw Star, Gundam, Robotech, you know, they know when to put that. Even Robotech's done by Home Gold, and it's an old company. It is a very good series still to watch, even if the movies were, even if it's Macross Plus, which was a mini-series. They're all good series to watch. Overall, I mean, that's like going platinum for it, you know, for science fiction anime. You know, there's not, because it gives you the idea of what science fiction is for anime, and it is pretty good from every angle, from Robotech, Gundam, Area 88, you know, even though it has a more modern day to it. You know, there's a lot of stuff based on it. Gundam is basically the biggest anime science fiction ever received. Cowboy Bebop, they got a couple movies out, but they only lasted one season back in the 90 and 99. That's when the year it was made and released. So, it's like when you think about certain types of anime, it's depending on what they can do with it. Steam Boy being for one, Metropolis being for another one. Even if they misspell the word Metropolis from the actual black and white version, there's a lot of details to that. Matrix, which is basically the Atlas, or there's an A instead of an M, so there's something about that, you know, you gotta think. Um, some of them are based on vampire novels from Vampire D. Um, Housing, there's basically a lot of science fiction novels out there that take a good step to it, but not many people that do it. There's not many people that watch a lot of science fiction for AMA as much as they did back in the old days. I mean, I was one of them. A kid growing up in the 90s, pretty much, watching it. And Tsunami came on, it was pretty good. I mean, that was like science fiction all around. Because you had Tom, well, first you started with Moltar Clark, then you had the guy that voices Tom. It's like you gotta really think that they did very good with the voice acting. I don't know if they're still doing it on Adult Swim because I haven't watched it since then. But it was not too easy to watch, but it was like very interesting. Dragon Ball Season Lore, when that's a science fiction novel for anime, there's like, and apparently the creator, God rest his soul. I mean, that was the one way person to have to go, and that's the last person somebody has to do it, brain aneurysm or something like that. You don't want to suffer for that. Um, but now when you look at science fiction from Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball, um, and a few others, you gotta really think the science fiction aspect to the characters, to the storyline, no matter if it's the movies or the actual series itself. Blue Gender would be another one from Funimation, but that's 50-50 right there. That only lasted one season. It wasn't that good, but it was a good science fiction novel to that for what they did with the voice acting. Same voice actors did Dragon Ball Z, apparently. Well, they did, I believe the one that played Cal Eugene in Blue Gender was the one that played in Yamcha. And I can't think of the guy's name, but the guy's a good actor, voice actor. He's a very good voice actor. Even today, he's still alive. He's not really doing much, but it's like you gotta think. That's one thing. The other part to that would be, yeah, there was something about that to where science fiction and anime does come along. It does go a long way from the movies to the series. It does go a long way for anime to really look into becoming a science fiction thing. And it does go a long way. You gotta think where it does go a long way, but you have to really think why. When we look at a science fiction mixed with anime, that's a series on a nutshell. Start back in the 80s, you gotta think. Start back in the 80s, early 90s, early 2000s, 2001s. IGPX is another one, which was the same company that did Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell would be another one. You gotta think how they would make voice acting to the character, and that's very interesting. They do very good voice acting for each of these series. Mine's the movie of Ghost in the Shell. You gotta think. And it's pretty cool where they can try to tribute to it. But overall, it's not too simple to where they do that. No, Felicity again. I hate that. Anyway, no, it's just you gotta think where they can go from the science fiction aspect to it. IGN would be another one because they do Ghost in the Shell and a couple other series. Blue Gender being another one. Ballistic Marine being another one, even more modern. There is some science fiction aspect to that, and it is pretty interesting. For the most part, where, yeah, there is some problem with some storylines that work on science fiction, no matter if it's the movie or the series. But overall, you gotta think, from a science fiction look, yeah, there is some aspect to that from the movie to the series, you know, but if it's a good series, you'll watch it, but for a science fiction novel. The other part to this would be Blue Gender being one of them, from Funimation. And it's like, the animation to that would be very interesting. The voice acting was good, but the combat situation was pretty stupid. Um, they tried their best in Blue Gender, even if it only lasted one season. Then they made The Warrior about, I think, around the same time the series came out as the movie. And they butchered the movie, apparently. It didn't go well. Um, and there's a lot of them out there when you look at anime. From a series to a movie, Endless Waltz, which was Gundam Wing. And that was a pretty good one. I like that. And I don't get into anime movies as much. If it's a good storyline for an anime movie, I'll watch it. Steam Boy was another one, even if it's 2 hours long. That was pretty interesting to see. The other part of that would be, where would the anime go for? You have to really think about the characters. You have to think of the plot. You have to think what the villain has in mind. You gotta think what happened. Robotech would be another one if it's called Macross 2, the movie. You gotta think what the Centrati are doing. Where there's a lot of issues there from one end to the other. There's one thing to that. But when it does come to anime with science fiction, there's a lot of plots to each series, to each movie, which is pretty interesting. You gotta really think. And I kind of like it to to a certain degree, where it's 50-50 with me when it comes to science fiction with anime. Now, if you're talking about something from real people, like the series $6 Million Man with Lee Majors, American Cyborg, Steel Warrior, you look at acting like that, minus the voice acting, those are done by real actors. You gotta think, for the most part. And they do pretty good for the most part. But where could they go with that if it would be perfect enough for them to do it? Yeah, that is perfect for them. The other part of that would be, where would they take that acting to? I think it depends on what they did, and a lot of actors that did a lot of science fiction movies are not really polite guys. Lee Majors being one of them. Van Damme was in between since he did Universal Soldier. So there's a lot of people that do a lot of acting, and it's pretty interesting. But for this episode, I want to really thank you for watching. Until next time, John Vic signing off with the Science Fiction Podcast. So until next time, John Vic, take care. See you guys in the next one.